Welcome to another episode of Chad's Chat. Join Chad Chilius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everyone. Today's podcast is sponsored by Chax Training and Consulting. If you're interested in supporting the podcast, there are sponsorship opportunities available. So just reach out to one of us and we can discuss that in more detail. My name is Chad Chilius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor, as well as Director of Training Solutions and Principal at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I'm Director of Media Productions here at Chax Training and Consulting. And Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. And if you'd like to get your certification, head on over to accessibilityassociation.org/certifications. Chad, I would ask you how you're doing, but I know how you're doing because you are doing fantastic because you are in Hawaii, you jerk. What are you doing there?
I am on vacation with my family on the Big Island in Hawaii. So this podcast is being recorded from my hotel room, which is a first for me. But yeah, I don't want us to, we didn't want to skip a podcast, so we're making the best of it. And so yeah, I'm here in the lovely Hawaiian environment, and just I'm in a great mood, by the way.
Awesome. Hey, I was reading an article the other day on LinkedIn about wheelchair accessible mats that this beach, I don't know where it was, this beach had employed for the first time to allow people in wheelchairs to actually go out onto the beach. I think it was Santa Barbara, or maybe I'm mistaken, but anyway, people could, take their wheelchairs all the way out to the water's edge. And I thought, wow, I'd never really thought about the fact that someone using a wheelchair would be such a huge barrier. I can imagine, right?
100%, Dax. I mean, my family and I, we were just up in New Hampshire at the beach. And New Hampshire doesn't have a huge coastline, right? But they do have a beautiful coastline. And that's where I actually noticed they had this mat, that went out so that wheelchair, and again, we always say accessibility benefits everyone, right? Because moms with strollers are also benefiting from those mats to get them out there. But what's really ironic, Dax, I mean, you and I were just at the accessibility camp Coeur d'Alene.
Right.
And one of the girls that we met, Jess. So a lot of people don't know, Coeur d'Alene is right on a lake.
Huge lake. I had no idea.
A huge lake. It's like one of the deepest lakes in the country. But Jess is still tirelessly working to get wheelchair access to the beach so that she can get down to the lake. Because currently, the only way she can get there is if somebody carries her in her wheelchair.
I was going to say, I got to imagine that a boat ramp would be terrible wheelchair experience, right? Because my first thought was, there's probably a boat ramp somewhere. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I know the angle at which you put that boat in the water. And a lot of times there's those little ribs that they build into the concrete so you have good traction. I'm like, that would not be a good user experience. I did find that article, Chad. It's a beach in Ontario. It says, this morning I visited a new 305-foot ADA compliant access mat at Ontario Beach Park that will allow people with mobility issues to access the beachfront. In just a matter of minutes, I saw wagons, strollers, and wheelchairs easily navigate the blue mat from the boardwalk to the beach.
100%. Yeah, not surprised at all. Yeah. So I don't know. It was just funny because the North Idaho College that hosts that accessibility conference. She's fighting within the college, I think, to get them to add, some type of ADA access for there. So it was just really interesting conversation with her. She's Miss Wheelchair Idaho, I think is what her title is. She was, and it's not a it's not a title that you like compete for. You get that title for your advocacy
Oh,
within
okay.
yeah. So she was a great she was really fun to talk to. Um,
Yeah. I
but
actually
anyway,
had the opportunity to talk to her a little bit too. She was definitely there was a lot of great people, and maybe we should do a future
mm,
episode about some of our experiences at Camp Coeur d'Alene. But if you've
yeah,
got it in your budget or you're near Idaho or can get there next year when they have this event, I highly suggest you go. It is a smaller event. But was hugely beneficial, and we got to meet Maha from Lebanon, who
yeah,
is an
yep,
accessibility advocate there, and listening to some of her struggles in creating multi-language conferences in other
yep.
countries. Holy cow. I would not wish that job on my worst enemy. Yeah. So
Well,
she's scared me of the wants to actually start our own conference. I'm like, Chad, we could start our
oh
own conference. After hearing that session, I'm like, no, I'm good.
yeah,
I'll just
I'm
attend.
sitting here. I'm like, Dax, shut up. But yeah,
Oh, that's so
Maha,
funny.
I still need to listen to this, but Maha gave a presentation. It was titled Lebanon, the most depressed, happy people in the world. And I just thought that title was so interesting. I really I need to go listen to that because it seems amazing. And maybe we'll have her on the
Yes.
podcast in a future episode so she can talk to us about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Chad, today we're going to talk about a couple of different things, but one of the things I really wanted to talk about was our new course coming up, Designing with Accessibility in Mind. And guys, don't turn the podcast off. This is not a sales pitch for the
No.
class. But I want to talk to you guys about some of the topics that we cover in this class because I think it's good information. And if you can't make it to the class, you're going to get some of that information in the podcast today. So I think it's definitely worth talking about. I mean, the class is designed for people who are primarily designers, right? You're working in Illustrator, InDesign, PowerPoint, Photoshop, that kind of thing, and creating social media posts or brochures or whatever it is that you're creating. We even go through some captions and some of the video stuff, and it gives you a really good idea of what are the barriers that you should be considering. And more than that, I think the most important thing is opening your mind to talking about how do I tell the story, considering that people might not all have access to the information the same way, right?
Yeah, they're not consuming the information in the same way, right? Just like, we could make the argument, even as a sighted, user, some of us are using, glasses to be able to read that content. Some of us are using significant glasses to read that content. And that's just a small portion of what we're talking about, right? But to try to kind of put it in people's brains, like we're talking about how people are consuming this content. And then, of course, we dive into, assistive technology, screen magnifiers. There's so many different ways people are going to be consuming the content you create. So it's good to be aware of all of those methods.
In addition, we talk about the telling the story and how you tell that story, because as a visual user, a person using vision to ingest the content, there are certain things that our brains kind of ignore. There's background noise that our brains are used to tuning out. So then we rely on other things like color and shape and size and order in which things are presented on the page. The biggest things are the things that attract us most for some people. Others, it's the photographs, and others, they might be looking at some of the subheadlines to try to figure out the details. And understanding that all of these things are ways that people can digest your content really helps you think about, how am I going to structure this, right? And when we start talking about structure, that starts to get into tags and how a person using assistive technology might be able to digest the content, and giving them multiple ways, right? Because I may want to use the bookmarks, Or maybe I just want to press H and go to the different headings, or I want to just read the graphics and press G. Just because you're not absorbing the content with sight, or because maybe you're using a screen magnifier, right? And where you put that content on the page is important, because if I'm constantly having to scroll left and right and up and down to get to some story, or to digest the information in an infographic, that can be very tiring for someone using a screen magnifier. It can honestly just be a really bad experience, right?
Right, absolutely. You know, as you were talking, Dax, something came into my mind when I was a teenager. In high school, I had driver's ed class, right? And I don't think they have that
Me
anymore
too.
in most
Nope.
places.
Yep, they don't.
But they showed a movie where they put these glasses on a driver, and as she was driving, you could see what she was looking at as she was driving. Right.
Right.
So
Eye
to
tracking device.
try to
Yeah.
teach you, like, you're not supposed to just look on the road. You want to look at like the people pulling out, on the left and the right. And what came to my mind was, if you put those glasses on a sighted reader, right, put it on 10 different readers, you're probably going to get 10 different results,
Right.
right? Because we don't all, we kind of assume, but we don't all consume the information in the same way. Some people might be
Right.
attracted to one thing versus another. And so when it comes to accessibility, I mean, in some ways, uh, when we define the tag structure, we're kind of forcing the user to read it in the order in which we perceive makes sense. However, assistive technology gives the user other options. As you were saying, Dax, one person might choose the bookmarks, another might choose the headings, another may choose to just read it in sequence. So it really is all about options for the user,
Right.
right?
Well, it goes back to the poor principles, right? Perceivable,
Yeah.
operable, understandable, and the last one is robust. And robust
Yeah.
really is the standard that that deals with giving people multiple ways to digest the content. And for those that are unfamiliar, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, is divided into 4 main categories, and that's perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And those categories have 78 success criteria. I think we're at 78 right now, Chad. I have to go back and double check. But anyway, and they're divided into single A, double A, and triple A. And I was just talking with somebody yesterday, and they're like, yeah, we tried it. We strive for, double A as a standard and triple A everywhere we can. And I went, wow, that's an interesting thing, because even in WCAG says, look, you cannot achieve compliance for all AAA elements at the same time, because one person's AAA barrier is another person's AAA success. Low vision users who have tunnel vision want things more closer together so that they can see things in a very compact view, but people who have peripheral vision need things a little bit more spread out. And so, you really can't accommodate every person's ability, but you need to be aware of which ones are the ones you're trying to target and what makes the most impact, right? Obviously, reflow is going to be a huge thing for people with tunnel vision, because if I can reflow the content into something readable, then I'm going to do that. And you and I both know that if you use reflow in Acrobat right now, and you've put white text on any other color background, it's not readable to someone in reflow mode. So as a designer, I know if I'm designing for people who might reflow my content, I'm never putting white text over an item, right? Designing with accessibility in mind. It limits that choice, but it's a small choice to make. I can change that color or use a different methodology to make that happen. So, it's about thinking about those types of things. And I bet right now our listeners are listening to that piece of advice going, oh, wow, I never really thought of that. And that's the whole point of this class, right? Is to open your mind to thinking about different things.
Yeah, I want to be clear in that this webinar is not about you memorizing all 78 categories of the WCAG principles, right? We kind of break that down, and we just talk about, the key things you should know about when you're, designing your content. And as Dax mentioned, again, everybody knows Dax and I are designers, and we're huge InDesign users, but these principles apply to PowerPoint. PowerPoint is a very design heavy application, right? I mean, you have a lot of flexibility with how you design your elements in PowerPoint, and even Word to some extent, right? I mean, Word is a little more limiting from a design standpoint. However, I've seen some really nice pieces created in Word. And so all of the things that we're talking about in this webinar apply regardless of what application you're using.
Well, honestly, Chad, even Illustrator and Photoshop and, a Publisher or Canva, any
Oh yeah.
program where you're designing anything, you have to
Hmm.
consider color blindness, color contrast, using color as an indicator, right? Items in red are this category and items in blue. I've seen things where they say items in red are external data and items in blue are internal data. And you're like, okay, but red
Yeah.
and blue to someone, might be very close to the same density, because when you look at that in a from a colorblind perspective, they both look about the same shade of dark gray. It's
Gray.
like
Yeah.
80%
Or
gray, right? So,
yeah.
but,
Well,
and then we talk about alt text, right? I mean, that's another thing that we touch on because it's such an important topic.
oh yeah.
When you're designing how we're describing those images, right, Chad?
Yeah. I mean, we have a webinar just on that topic, right? I mean, that topic, it's so funny whenever we talk about this, Dax, like you think, oh, alt text, that's simple. I just write a sentence or two about the image and I'm done. But I will tell you, we have been approached by so many people who struggle with how to appropriately write alternate text. And that's where our webinar came from. And we just kind of break down the process of writing alternate text. I mean, you've got this great formula that you teach people that just kind of helps them through how to write appropriate alternate text. So big topic.
Well, and the formula is really for how do you break down a chart or graph, right? Because it's
Right.
the hardest thing. Because people want to say, well, it's a bar chart and showing sales for 2022. And I'm just like, okay, great. I want you to give me any meaningful data you can from that description. And the answer is you can't, right? Well, I
Hmm.
really can't put every data point in the description. No, you probably shouldn't. But there was a point for which you put that chart in there. What was it? To show the trend, to show the outlier, to show that
Right.
in January our sales were triple what they were in November, right? I mean, there's
Yeah.
some reason that you put that in there, and we give you this formula to kind of help you walk through what that is. And then there's three other key principles that we teach in this designing with accessibility in mind class, right, Chad?
Yeah. So, I mean, one item, this is a really important one that you need to make. You need to make the decision right up front. Do you have meaningful content, or is the content decorative? Right. I mean, that's like step number one, right? Does it have any inherent meaning in your document? If the answer is yes, we add alternate text. If no, we artifact it. Very simple.
Well, you know
And
what's interesting about that, Chad, is that we were having a discussion on our PDF accessibility Facebook group. And for those listening, if you're not part of that group, go be part of that group. We're approaching 3,000 members, which is
yeah.
amazing. But someone actually, it was on the IAAP's message board. It wasn't in our Facebook group. It was on the IAAP's message board. And as a member of the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, there is a message forum, the old BBS kind of message boards. And someone had posted the topic saying, well, I have a live file, a live PowerPoint. Should I put the word decorative in the alt text? And at first I was like, no way. Why would you? There's a box for that. Check the box. And someone brought up a really good point. If I'm editing the source as a blind person, as a person with low vision, or I'm blind, if I have just marked that box as decorative, when the JAWS or NVDA gets to that element on the screen, and it doesn't announce anything, it just says graphic. And so there is nothing as an editor to tell you that that is marked as decorative. Then you have to go in, open the alt text properties, and try to go inspect the box to see if that checkbox is checked. But someone said this is the point at which you can put decorative in the alt text temporarily, so that as someone who is editing the document knows that these are decorative elements and that they can be skipped. I thought it was a really good point that I really hadn't considered before.
Well, Dax, I mean, you and I say this all the time, when we're remediating a document, we often need to ask the question, what is the intent?
Right.
Right. And in this case, we need to ask that question further upstream, right? Because we're not just talking about the PDF, we're talking about somebody who needs to edit that PowerPoint file. And so the intent is different for that situation. And so, yeah, that suggestion of putting the word decorative in the alternate text, I mean, that allows the user to know, oh, yeah, I don't have to worry about this, or this has been marked as decorative. So that's really interesting situation, that you bring up.
Well, you just want to make sure you remove that before you make your final PDF, but it's a really great marker.
Now that I'm thinking, Dax, if you put decorative in the field, but you also check the decorative checkbox, which one takes precedence?
The checkbox makes it not voiced. You just hear graphic, so it doesn't read the alt text. So
my point is, you don't really have to go back and remove it.
Yes, but I guess what we're trying to explore here is that if you just simply checked the decorative box, it in fact, nulls the word decorative out. So you don't necessarily need to go in and remove the word decorative. You can just check the box, which actually brings me to another point, Chad. Alt text versus actual text, right? Because I see so many times in documents created in Word and PowerPoint where they have both alternate text and actual text, right? You see them both. And what I found out was that there's an older version of Office, and I don't remember which version it is. I think it's 2007, that actually puts, if you put alt text in there, it adds it to both the actual text and the alt text field. It adds it to both, which was an interesting thing. I'd have to go back and check which version, but I've seen it over and over and over again, and it's an interesting thing. And I think some people do it just by mistake. They just think, oh, I just want to do double duty. I don't know which one it goes in, so therefore I'm going to put it in both, right? But that maybe you can explain the difference between actual text and alt text.
Yeah, absolutely. So, alternate text's job is to describe the image in its context. So, alternate text job, when assistive technology reads a figure that has alternate text, it is going to say graphic, and then it is going to voice the alternate text that was assigned to that graphic. So the reader knows that they've encountered an image, a figure of some sort, and then they know the description is describing that figure. Actual text, the fact that it's a figure is completely ignored, right? And so actual text actually replaces the fact that it's a figure. So it's never voiced as a graphic using assistive technology, and all you're going to hear is the actual text. So, I'll give you a quick example. Like I had a document recently where they used an icon as it was effectively a numbered list, but they used a figure as the number, right?
Okay.
And so that was a perfect example of where actual text worked out very well, because I put actual text on each number, and then when that list was read, it simply said 1, blah blah blah, 2, blah blah blah. So the fact that it was a figure was irrelevant, and it was never voiced. It was a really good solution. So whenever you have a figure that is effectively behaving as text, Even sometimes people like to use an icon to indicate meaning, right?
Right.
Where like whenever you see this icon, this means that that you're eligible for this promotion, or so something like that. So when you add actual text to it, it simply voices you're eligible for this
Eligible.
promotion, and it just keeps on
Right.
reading. Yeah. So
Right.
it's but I think we discovered, Dax, going back to what you were saying about adding actual and alternate text. When both exist in a PDF, actual text takes precedence.
Right. So if you set actual text and alt text for a photograph, the user will not hear graphic and then your alt text. It will just hear whatever you put in as your alt text, which can create a confusing user experience depending upon what it is. I always try to tell
Exactly.
people actual text is a one-to-one replacement for the
Yeah.
image that it's replacing. So if you had the
Yep.
word sale in Photoshop and you made it as some, like price tags with SALE in each one of the price tags, you'd want to use actual text, because all that it really matters is the word that it says the word sale, because you don't really want to hear 4 letters SALE on red price tags with strings hanging. I mean, that's all superfluous information that we really don't need
Hmm.
to know. And then the last part about about the alt text portion of our designing with accessibility in mind is how to write effective alt text descriptions. And this is a really good exercise because we walk you through literally 6 or 7 examples of, okay, let's look
Yeah.
at this image. And what are we trying to analyze? And our goal is to get your mind thinking about all the different elements that might be important, and then let you make the educated assumption or the educated decision on what is important, whether it's through context or through topic or through meaning, direction from the author. And we even give you some great tools using Adobe Bridge on how to set or embed that alt text into the metadata of the photo. So if you're using InDesign, you can just automatically suck that alt text or actual text right out of the image that's in there. And it's a great way to be able to handle large volumes of images when you're trying to
Yeah.
standardize how you describe them, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. Well, this class chat is going to be coming around September 15th, which is just about a month away. It's a 3-hour class. You're going to have some hands-on experience creating alt text, so be prepared to participate. We're going to give you some handouts on how to create alt text, some effective writing handouts, also some writing with accessibility in mind, and some really great tips for social media and how you can create more accessible social media posts. And I think that's a lot of things that people aren't necessarily considering. I saw on LinkedIn the other day, a guy was using emojis because you can't bold or italic, which actually I think to me is kind of a barrier for for LinkedIn. I wish they would allow you to just at least do bold, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but he used emojis to create bold words letter by letter in his post. And I was listening to it with NVDA. I try to train myself every couple of days. I'll throw NVDA on and I'll just leave it on the entire time I'm working, just to try to get myself more acclimated to having it being able to use the navigation keys and hear it at a higher speed. And when I was reading his post, the words with the emojis were skipped. There were nothing was being voiced, and he was using them for entire words, so the sentences were kind of fragmented as I was reading it.
Yeah.
And so I thought, I let him know, hey, just by the way, when you use these emojis, they're not getting voiced. I don't know, the answer was a little okay, thanks for letting me know kind of thing, or
Sure.
whatever. So it wasn't necessarily oh my gosh, I'm gonna go fix it, but at least they're aware. And now you guys are aware, our audience is aware. But so go to our website, accessibilityunraveled.com, or find us on LinkedIn, and we'll give you an early bird registration coupon code. Matter of fact, I'll even give it to you now. It's early B22, all caps, early B22. 22. So it stands for Early Bird 2022. And that'll give you $75 off if you go register. Our class size is limited. We limited it to about 15 people. So we want to make sure that we give everybody the attention they deserve. So it's really, first come, first serve basis. So
100%. Yeah, it's really fun class, I know, for both of us to teach. But I think that the attendees also get a lot out of it. We've had a lot of really good comments about the ones that we've already done, and just really a lot of good information in there.
Right.
So,
Awesome.
So Dax, I wanted to talk to you about something that I encountered this week. And I'm sure our listeners have run into this as well. I had I think it was about 106-page document, and the last 15 pages of the document was another document that was placed into my existing document, right? And so
the nested PDF.
Yeah. So, I mean, in my case, it was InDesign, although I've seen this done in Word as well, where people have taken an entire page from another file and dropped it into Word in the same fashion, and I'm sure even in PowerPoint. But the fundamental problem with that technique is that every one of those pages is now just a figure. Right. So whenever you place from another file, in Word, you'd be insert picture from file. In InDesign, you do a file place. Every page is just a figure. And so I went back to my client, right? And this is what we encourage all of our listeners to do. I went back to the client and I said, what is the intent of these pages? Right.
Right.
And it was kind of a double whammy, Dax, because some of it was a form.
Okay.
And so I said, okay, are they supposed to be able to fill out this form? And the answer was no. I'm like, okay, cool. I said, are they supposed to be able to read it? And the answer was yes. All right. So now we have a problem, right? I mean, not really a problem, but it's work, right? And so now what I had to do, Dax, is I had to creatively re-tag all of the content so that it was read as text instead of a figure. And during the process, I encountered a behavior that I know a lot of our listeners have encountered, where using the reading order panel in Acrobat, it just all of a sudden stopped letting me tag.
Right.
Okay. And in the past, I have given a workaround. If you go into the content panel on that page and you pull the content out of their containers, typically the reading order then gets its memory jogged or whatever and allows you to start tagging again. Well, on one of my pages, I literally pulled everything out of their containers. Like there literally were no more containers in the content pane, but it still would not let me tag. And I'm like, boy, now what do I do? And I was reminded of a tip that you gave me, Dax, that was using the feature called Create Tag from Selection.
Right.
Now, I often use that feature to split marked content into smaller chunks. Oftentimes, when I want to make a link out of something or I want to put a span on something, you can use Create Tag from Selection to kind of break the marked content into smaller chunks. But you had told me about a technique that you use, and that is you go to the content pane and you click on the object that you want to tag. Then you switch over to the tags pane, and in the option button at the top of the tags pane, you click on that and you choose Create Tag from Selection. And when I did that, it actually was able to tag the content. And this was a really exciting discovery for me, right? Because I mean, we have been fighting this problem for years, right? When you're not able to tag something, you spend a lot of time, trying to figure this out. But what I think I've discovered right? And I would love to get feedback from our audience, but it seems to me that using that technique that I just described of clicking on the object in the content pane, switching over to the tags, and choosing create tag from selection, that seems to overcome that limitation. And as soon as I did that, then I was able to continue tagging using the reading order panel. So I would
Oh,
love to
okay.
hear back from you guys. I'd love to hear your experience. Like the next time you run into that problem, try using that workaround that I just described to you, and I'd love to get your feedback. I'd love to hear like whether it helped you or whether you found it to work or not. Because for me, it seemed to work perfectly. The problem with this issue is it's hard to force it to happen. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like if you gave me a document to say, show me this problem, it's really hard to do because it just seems to happen at random. But yeah, please reach out to us. Either Dax or myself, you have our email addresses. Shoot us an email and let us know how you made out.
Well, it's interesting, Chad. I take that actually one step further. So when you go to the content panel and you select the object on, you select page 12, you scroll through your content objects on page 12, you find the right one, it's now highlighted on the page, right? If you go to the switch over to the tags panel and hit the drop down at the top and do create tag from selection, it will drop that new tag at the very end of your tags tree. And then you have to
Good
go and
point.
move it where it goes. So what I do is I go into the tags tree first. I find where I want to create that tag, and I actually create the content object, the box. I create the tag paragraph or H1 or whatever it is, and then I leave it. I select it and leave it selected. Now, when I switch back to the content panel, find that object, and then switch back to the tags panel again, I can right click on that tag and do create tag from selection, and it will drop that new content into the tag that I made. If you don't do it in that order, you lose the selection for the content panel. So if you're like, oh, I didn't create the tag, I got to go do it, and you've already selected the content, the content, it will unselect the content for you. So you really have to do it in that order. Select the go make the tag where you want it and have that tag selected. Go back to the content panel, find your object. Once it's selected, go back to the tags panel and right click on that new tag and do create tag from selection, which the shortcut key for that is R, right? It is create when you're in the tags panel. What's interesting is the shortcut key for it when you're in the content panel is different. I wish they would standardize what the shortcut keys are when for those different things. It's kind of a bummer that they aren't the same. So awesome. Well, Chad,
Cool.
I know that the surf and sun are calling you to go out there and enjoy. Get a tiki shaped drink for me. Do you drink the ones in the pineapple or the ones in the coconut?
Both.
Ah.
I don't limit myself. I'm on vacation, right?
Well, I hope this has been useful for everybody.
Guys.
Again, we the class is coming up September 15th. Reach out or go to the website accessibilityunraveled.com, use the coupon code. We'll put it in the link to in the links where we post this this podcast episode. And we really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen and follow us. And I had somebody actually reach out. We always say, just reach out to us on LinkedIn. I actually did have someone send me a message just the other day saying, hey, I'm reaching out because you said to on your podcast. And I was just like, oh, that makes me feel good. There is one person listening to our show. So,
Dax, somebody did that to me as well. This last week, she messaged me and she's like, hey, you said to reach out, so here I am. And I'm like, oh, it's so awesome to connect with you. Thank you. And, it's great to, great when people do it. So, All right, guys. Well, that brings us to the conclusion of another Chax Chat podcast episode. Once again, we want to thank Chax Training and Consulting for sponsoring this episode. And just a reminder, if you're looking for in-person or online training or struggling to establish an accessibility program within your organization, head over to accessibilityunraveled.com. My name is Chad Chilius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where each week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.